Carmichael. Thanks for coming to sit down with editors of the Gazette-Mail. We did invite 3 other candidates, 1 other Republican and 2 Democrats. One of the Democrats was unable to come, planned to, and the others did not come. So, it's yourself today.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So what we like to do first is we like to introduce ourselves to you, and then we'll do some questions.
Okay.
So we'll start down at the end.
I'm Brad McElhenney. I'm co-editor of the Gazette-Mail.
I'm Kelly Merrick, editor of the Daily Mail editorial page.
I'm Whitney Burdett, I'm an editorial writer for the Daily Mail opinion page.
Phil Candler, State House reporter.
Chris Norris, photographer.
I'm Greg Moore, I'm the city editor of the Gazette-Mail.
And I'm Dawn Miller, I'm the Gazette opinion page editor.
Yes.
So thanks again.
Well, thank you.
Okay. First thing on most people's minds, I think, is the budget. Shall we start talking about the budget?
That's what's
Okay.
still going on, sure.
We haven't officially introduced Senator Carmichael.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Introduce yourself.
I'm Senator Mitch Carmichael from Jackson County, 4th Senatorial District, and I have the pleasure currently of serving as Senate Majority Leader.
And running for re-election.
Running for re-election,
All right.
yes.
Very good. Thanks, Greg. Okay, so budget, everybody? Does that sound good?
Sure.
Do you have, what's the plan? What's the deal? How are you going to solve this budget?
Well, I'd like to maybe first comment on why we, at this point, do not have a budget. And there are various opinions as it relates to that. But, it's been tradition and it's been custom and practice for years and years and years, all my term in the service, in the Senate and in the House, to extend the regular session by usually about a week to complete the budget on actions that have legislative actions that affect spending or taxes really aren't incorporated into that final document in such a way that we can vote on it at the last day of the legislature. So it's been typical to extend that. Well, during this period, we extended for 3 days. The governor extended us for only 3 days to complete the budget, and on the 3rd day, the administration presented us with a roughly $92 million adjustment to the revenue estimates. So really did throw a wrench into the budget process, such that we made the decision that rather than continue this deliberations and debates, let's just adjourn, work this out, get a better handle on exactly where the $92 million is and so forth, and then come back and complete the action on the budget. So we're in that process right now. And what I would say to you is we're confronted with a $270 million revenue shortfall versus the budget. So what what will be required is to either raise taxes on citizens of West Virginia by $270 million, which the governor apparently has expressed some sentiment for doing that in the form of a consumer sales tax, which raises about $200 million, and then a 45-cent tobacco tax, which raises about $72 or $3 million. I think that's an extreme position to completely fund the shortfall with new government taxes, new taxes. And then there are some, frankly, mostly within the Republican Party, that want to cut government by $270 million. And I think that's a relatively extreme position. So what I think we're going to end up with is a balanced, adult, responsible plan in which we raise new revenue in the amount of about $100 million, cut expenditures, cut government by about $100 million, and then take the rest from one-time funds, for instance, the rainy day or sweeping some other accounts. We think that is a measured, balanced, responsible plan that puts us on a path toward really budget sustainability. But to do so all in one fell swoop by either cutting government by $270 or raising taxes, taking tax dollars out of the citizens' pockets for $270 million, we just believe either one of those extremes is irresponsible. So we want to take basically a third approach. Is that too long of an answer?
So I don't know which one to ask first. Which revenue or which cuts?
Okay, the revenue measures will be a 45-cent tobacco tax increase, which is a elaborated upon, raises between 70 to 73.4 million dollars. Then the other is many of you are familiar with a program, and it's all been validated by the governor's office. In fact, they recommended that it brings in about $20 million, and it's essentially a repayment mechanism to the federal government for some loans and so forth that were taken by the state, and they can restructure those in such a way that saves about $20 million a year. So when you put those two together, depending on some rounding issues and so forth, you're in the $95 to $100 million range for revenue. For government cuts, the thought process, at least, is from the leaderships, is that we want to exclude public education. Our education is a vital, incredible, important component of our government. It's really one of the primary functions of our government, is to provide a fair and equitable education. So we want to exclude that, as well as DHHR, particularly Medicaid, because of our matching money. I mean, every time we cut a dollar there, you're losing basically $3 in match, a little less than that. But so it would be imprudent, we believe, to cut that. So it leaves you about $1 billion of government expenditures from which to go get this $100 million. We look at basically and across the board 10% cut to many of those remaining agencies. Some will get, like for instance, I'll give you a great example. The tobacco cessation program, we spend $3 million a year on it. There would be some sentiment to just eliminate that program and allow the 45-cent tobacco tax to essentially be the deterrent for tobacco cessation. So there's $3 million that lessens the impact on some other agencies because we take 100% of that fund. And there's others like that that we'll go through with a little bit of more of a fine-tooth comb. But what I will say is from a legislative perspective, it's very difficult to surgically cut the budget. You almost need an executive branch level decision to say, we don't need this agency, we do need this agency, and so forth. So we'll do, a very diligent job of reviewing those. But at the end of the day, we're intent on getting about $100 million out of the remaining expenditure sources in state government.
Mr. Carmichael, you said you were working on the budget and then the governor hit you with a $92 million adjustment. Do you think the legislature would come up with a budget in the next few days if not for that $92 million?
Yes. The House and the Senate had agreed essentially to the budget. I mean, there would have been some variances and differences. Maybe we were within 13 hours of passing it when we received the $92 million bond.
Kind of along the lines you've outlined here, $100 million new revenue, $100 million.
Well, when we were presented with the $92 million decrease in revenue estimates, that affected everything. But we were along the lines of one-time monies, which the governor's expressed a real sentiment against using rainy day fund. And I understand that, I respect that position and so forth. But at the end of the day, we think that a modest utilization of a taxpayer savings account in these difficult times is a prudent thing to do.
You said basically outline what you expect the new budget to be, but it sounds almost like it's a done deal. But the House Republicans are going to go for that, you believe?
Well, I shouldn't present it as a done deal. I should present it as the goal. That's our sort of our plan. That's the way we're trying to persuade members to see the value of that plan. And so one of the things that we deal with, though, Kelly, is that so often, unless you have a plan on the table that you can honestly offer to other members to say, this is what we're thinking, then it becomes this process of, well, what if we did this? What if we did this? What if we did this? And there's too many what ifs, and we just need to settle in on a plan and promote the value of that plan to the membership. And we think we're there. you know, we can always change it around the margins, but we need to sell the deal to the membership. We believe we're there in the Senate, and the House is almost there, and the governor has to buy in on it also. So it is not a completed deal by any means, but it is the direction that we're pursuing.
In your written responses to us, you mentioned as a long-term strategy for West Virginia's problems, restructuring how pension payouts are made.
Uh-huh.
Could you elaborate on that and tell us what you would like to see?
My intention with that, we pay about $450 million a year to catch up our pension obligations from previous legislatures that didn't fully fund those. And we're on a payout plan with that was structured, I think it was 40-year payout plan, to get us 100% funded. And many actuaries will say, you know, that 100% funding assumes that everybody retires that day. And that obviously doesn't happen and would never happen. So many actuaries consider a pension plan fully funded at 90%. So we're looking at ways that perhaps we could restructure that payment into that, to the arrears, or making up those payments in arrears in a less onerous way. For instance, I'll elaborate on this. We calculate those payments to the pension plans. A lot of it has to do with the earnings that are in the investment management board that year. And so, for instance, if we have a year in which the investment management board returns 10% on our investments, there's a less of a contribution because it's calculated on 7.5%. And when we have a year in which our earnings are far less than 7.5%, we have to put more into the plan. Many states do a leveling approach where you average it out over a period of time, and such that you don't get caught on one year you have low earnings, so you have to put a whole bunch into your pension plan. And likewise, when you have a great earnings year, you don't put as much into it. We want to do more of a leveling stream in the teachers' retirement system in particular, because it's such a big obligation for us. And so we want to continue to pay and to our pension obligations and catch up what previous legislatures had left unfunded, but we want to do it in a way that maybe gives us some flexibility and maintains our bond rating as well. So we're cognizant of those issues and just looking at what other states have done in such a way that maybe, you know, in difficult budget years like this, we don't have to put $450 million into our pension plan, maybe put 400. So those kind of thoughts.
Didn't the governor sound awfully leery when that idea was
Yeah.
first floated?
Yes, he is very, you know, he is not willing, I don't believe, to go down that path. So that's why I didn't mention it during the discussion about how we get to the budget agreement. I don't think he's there with that at this point. In fact, I'm positive he's not. And and I respect that position. You know, one of the things I guess I would like to say is this is a process that needs to be bipartisan. And we recognize that the governor is, you know, represents one spectrum of the political, you know, arena, and the legislature has the other spectrum, or the Republicans. But we recognize that this is a joint government effort that we need to put the people first and compromise. Be willing to compromise, and so that's a great question that Phil mentioned, that the governor is really adamant about not lessening those pension payment plans. And so we'll work with that. We'll find other ways. And we just want him to work with us as well.
Well, he'll be gone.
Yeah, I mean, he won't be gone until, you know, next year. So we have a budget to complete this year, and you're right, though, that you know, his views will, as governor, won't be, you know, he won't be governor for that much longer. But while he is, we want to, you know, work with him and get to a budget.
What else on your minds?
2 years ago at the legislative Chamber of Commerce, Charles Airlines Issues Day,
Mhm.
someone asked you, or you were one of the panelists, and someone in the audience asked the question, what can state government do to help business growth in West Virginia. And I love your answer. You say, get out of the way.
Yeah.
And I even wrote an editorial in the Daily Mail about that, get out of the way. And then the very next day came the leak in the Elk River, the
Yes.
chemical tank in Elk River. And a lot of people who were more staunchly for government regulations, this shows what happens when you don't have enough regulation. And we can just debate how much or how little regulation affected that. But just what is the proper balance? The government should be regulating business and how it should allow its own business growth.
Yeah, that's a great question because there is a continuum. I think the less government intervenes in the operations of a business and the operation of free markets, the better it is for the business. But likewise, there is a legitimate role of government to protect the citizens and to ensure that businesses function in a fair manner that protects all competitors in the marketplace. When you get into, and one of the things I want to point out is that from a regulatory perspective, West Virginia has been rated by some independent agencies and study groups as the most overregulated state in the nation. And so I think by any measure, Kelly, we are overregulated in West Virginia. In fact, this year, the legislature repealed about 10% of the regulations that relate to businesses and the operation of our agencies within the state of West Virginia. It's a monumental piece of legislation, really, a big repeal bill. Governor signed it. Many of these rules and regulations had not even been utilized for many years, and yet businesses still had to comply with them. So that, I am one that believes that we are currently in an overregulated environment in West Virginia, and we need to absolutely lessen the regulatory burden on our businesses and allow them to function in a free market economy. So, to the extent that we can get out of the way of businesses hiring those job creators, get out of their way, it's a great scenario, and I think it does help the economy when you do so. Having said that, though, I absolutely want to speak to the point that regulation is vital. There is a proper role for regulatory schemes in government and with our agencies to protect the people and to protect our natural resources and so forth. But when we carry it too far, we need to recognize that it does hurt the economy.
So is Freedom Industries overregulated?
Freedom Industries, in my view, was not overregulated. They had the proper degree of regulation that was not exercised properly. So many times, an event happens, and the natural reaction is for the legislature to pass a new rule or a new law or a new, which we did, right? And I think it was appropriate. But the next year, we came back and reformed that above ground storage tank regulations because they were just absolutely too onerous. They did reach into areas that were never intended to be regulated. I mean, we were regulating and monitoring above ground water storage tanks. If they leak, it's water. It's clean, fresh water. Some of those regulations were overly burdensome, and we tried to strike the proper balance by coming back. But the natural reaction, the inclination, is to overregulate when you have an event. And so there's political pressure to do so, but I think we came back and struck the proper balance.
And when you mentioned the 10% of regulations you got rid of, do any examples come to mind of the types of things you think the state's better off without?
Frankly, none come readily to mind.
Right.
Many of these, I will say, had been identified. We sent out a document to all the agencies to identify for us the regulations that they did not utilize and that seemed to be obsolete and those kind of things. And they submitted those to us. So, it's as your code books expand, it just we want to be cognizant and aware that more regulation and more laws and more codes doesn't equate to better environments. We just need to be aware of that.
What group was it that said we're the most overregulated state?
Was it? I want to think it was CNN or CNBC. One of the, I can get it to you. I'm sorry. I don't know that.
I've seen it a few times.
Yeah.
Organizations, I can't think of anyone.
Yeah.
I want to say, I want to say Forbes, but I'm not sure.
It might have been. Yeah.
Or what their source was on that.
Okay. So what does West Virginia need to do to grow the tax base, to grow the economy?
I think we've taken a lot of great steps. I always talk about the 4 pillars of economic growth in West Virginia. And it's not. I'll preface my answer by first saying it's not government. It's not a plan that we can pass in West Virginia that the government somehow incents growth. It's to allow the free market enterprise system to flourish and to function. And to do that, I think we talk about the 4 pillars of growth. One is civil justice reform, and we've taken a lot of steps, to make our courts more fair, equitable, balanced, and predictable. And we've gotten rid of some of the regulatory or some of the laws that were out of step with other nations or with other states. The second is our regulatory schemes that we've talked about. We wanted to lessen the regulatory burden on our businesses and enable them to function in more of a free market manner. The third is our tax structure, in which we wanted to incent job creators to utilize their capital and invest in West Virginia to create the jobs. And then the fourth is our education system, such that we provide our students with a world-class education that allows them to compete in a 21st century economy. Those are the 4 pillars: civil justice reform, regulatory reform, tax reform, and education enhancements that we believe position West Virginia in the proper balance to allow our natural advantages to take effect. We're so perfectly positioned from a geographic perspective. I mean, when you look, we're 24-hour drive to 70% of America's population. We have abundant water resources. We have available workforce. We've got everything that we need to prosper. Great natural resources in terms of energy resources. We just have not had the policies in place that allow our citizens to take advantage of the many benefits that we offer from a job perspective. And this transition from a fossil fuel economy is, difficult. It's very tough. So we're managing our way through that.
So you mentioned education, but if I recall correctly, you are not a big fan of Common Core line standards and tests. Is that correct?
Well, many in the Republican Party have not been a big fan. I actually probably many people would say I was responsible for not this past session, the previous session, of keeping the Common Core standards in place. And many people, I think, misalign or misunderstand that standards do not equate to curriculum. Curriculum is different, and as long as you have the flexibility in how you deliver those standards are standards. Math is math, science is science. Those shouldn't change from state to state to state. What I have been an opponent of is the Smarter Balanced Assessment testing. That it takes an inordinate amount of time to deliver and to evaluate student performance in our schools. So that I think we spend too much time testing, and particularly we test with a mechanism that the students many times understand, particularly at the higher grade levels, that this doesn't affect their grades, doesn't impact whether they receive a scholarship or not. It's just time out of the classroom, really. And so I think an inordinate amount of time is spent testing, but Common Core standards, and I'm fine with changing the standards, but I just want to lock in on a standard and make sure that we deliver a world-class education to our students. And yes, they have to be evaluated and tested, but this testing mechanism, the schemes that we're running through now, are just too onerous, just completely too onerous.
Well, I asked because you mentioned having a world-class education system, and one of the things that was behind Common Core was having West Virginia students study to the same standards as other students around the country, and having tests that you can compare to tests around the country, because we compare West Virginia students
Mm-hmm.
places around the country and across the country, I mean around the world, but not necessarily in a valid way. And it seems like the whole Common Core thing was to get to a valid
Mhm.
comparison. Do you want that kind of comparison?
I definitely want that kind of comparison. Whether or not the Common Core standards, and by the way, they're adopted in many states, probably half, and others they are not. But there are various standards, and I guess I'm a little bit lost at what people. I think there was a fear that the federal government was overreaching into the local classrooms and imposing a more federal role for education, which should, I think, does better in a local, with a more local influence. And so that was the fear, and maybe in some respects well-founded, because the federal government will often tie money to the adoption of particular standards and so forth. And that is not the proper role for a federal government, to reach into the local education systems. But I want our students to be compared, and to win the competition for student achievement on not just a national basis, on a worldwide basis. It's imperative. It's our responsibility. It's our duty, really, to provide a world-class education to our students. And when we don't do that, and we're not, we're neglecting one of our primary roles. So we have to be willing to make the tough decisions to.
You say we're not doing that now?
Well, I think the student achievement scores on a national standards basis do not indicate that our students are performing at a level that is commensurate with many other states. Now we can say that that's due to socioeconomic demographics in West Virginia. We certainly spend in our education environment on a per student basis. We rank very favorably, but our student achievement scores have not measured up, and I believe that to the extent we lessen the regulatory schemes from Charleston and allow the local schools and principals to manage the affairs, and allow our teachers to teach without so much over-regulation from the education department, then I think we'll do much better, much better. That's my view. More of a local control, more teacher control of the classroom, and administrators control of the school.
I think one of the more dramatic moments during the session was your vote and speech on the RFRA bill.
Yeah.
Kind of take us through some of your thinking on that and what
Yeah.
the ramifications have been since then.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I think it's important to put this in the context of what's happened now in North Carolina, Georgia, and Mississippi with the recent their passage of recent legislation affecting these issues. This was always a difficult issue for me. Normally, I come to the Senate floor, and the votes are easy for me. I kind of know where I'm at philosophically and so forth. And I'm a Christian, and my faith teaches me that we value the dignity, the human dignity of each person, and there are those who are different than us, and that's not an indictment. It's a healthy respect for the diversity of our citizens and of God's people. And so, Phil, I really struggled with that issue, and so often it can be demagogued, that issue, and put forth in a way that if you're not for this, then you're for alternative lifestyles that mean you're not Christian. And I just do not believe that. I did not believe that then. I don't believe it now. I think I did the right thing in supporting an amendment that all it did was specify that this bill could not be used for discrimination. And anything other than that was within the context of the bill. The bill itself said churches cannot be forced to perform marriages for which they have a religious disagreement with. They can't be forced to perform gay marriages. That was in the bill that I voted for. And yet, the opponents, or those who promote the ability to use the bill for discrimination, voted, against it. I guess we'd just say, at the end of the day, we're all in this world together, and there's no reason for us to discriminate against those that are different than us. And furthermore, I want to protect the free religious expression of those who have firmly held religious beliefs. Absolutely. We need to protect that. But to say that many people said that this bill would be used as a shield against those, when you're being promoted or forced to do something that you don't want to do because of your strongly held religious beliefs. And maybe so. But it could also be used as a sword to perpetrate discrimination or to inflict discrimination. And this was a fix to a problem that doesn't exist, essentially, in West Virginia. We have beautiful protections in our Constitution. This was just driving a wedge, I felt, between West Virginians, when we all should just be working together to promote growth, opportunity, hope, prosperity. And why use something like this? But, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit with this, but I just want to say, those who promoted this, I think, did so with the absolute best motives. They firmly believed that it was their religious expression that was under attack, and I respect that position completely. But at the end of the day, we have to be cognizant that we live in a diverse society, and we should be able to express our diversity and welcome it in a way that doesn't threaten others, and just, I don't know, can't we all just get along? It sounds cliche, but at the end of the day, let's just love our neighbor and help them prosper and succeed, and let's don't use the weight of the law to inflict harm to others, even though it's maybe not done in a way that they feel that that's the purpose of it. Still, we got to be sensitive that there are those that are different and respect that diversity.
You mentioned these other states that have passed legislation that, without having read it, it sounds to me like it goes even farther than what was discussed here. What's your reaction when you see news stories about those other states?
I think that West Virginia dodged a bullet. I really do. I think we have done, whether you agree or disagree, we have done so much that we firmly believe will help our business community in West Virginia. Right to work legislation, elimination of the prevailing wage, many of the tort legal reforms that we've done, some tax reform, all that stuff is done to create jobs and opportunity. Now, you can have a legitimate discussion about whether you believe that it will or not, but trust me, our heart isn't right, that we absolutely did it to create jobs. And then for us to take an action that the job creators and the businesses many throughout America look and say, we don't want to come to a state that holds those kind of beliefs would have been, on its face, hypocritical for us to do that. So I think we maintained a consistent approach to helping to help create jobs and opportunity and growth in West Virginia. So I feel like often that we did dodge a bullet there.
Asking you to predict the future a little bit here, but next year, in session also, so you're still in Senate, presume some version of this bill, someone will introduce it somewhere.
Yeah.
Will the backlash in other states make it easier for people to say this is not what we should be doing?
I think that it will, and I think that the actions taken by this legislature this year will diminish the prospects of the bill passing, any kind of bill like that passing. Now, this will be an election issue. I mean, there'll be people that will seek to use the vote on this issue to drive a political wedge for many uninformed people that really don't understand the depth and the breadth of this issue. But I've already seen that happen.
I was just going to
Yeah.
ask, have you seen that?
Yeah, I've absolutely seen that happen. I've experienced it in my own race where people will say that somehow failure to pass this bill meant that you would have restrooms, public restrooms, being utilized by in a non-gender specific manner. When there's nothing in this bill that even remotely address that, but it's those who use this issue for partisan, nasty political advantage. They demagogue it and they misconstrue it and they prey upon people who don't understand the issue. And what I would say to all my Christian friends and all the people in West Virginia, this is not about. This is about accepting people. That's what our faith teaches us to do, to accept and maybe not condone actions or behavior, but we certainly accept and recognize that none of us are perfect in this world. And we all, stand in need of forgiveness. And so for us to set ourselves up as somehow better than someone else and condone some type of discrimination is the wrong way to go. But this will be used for political purposes. In the most ridiculous manner, talking about public restrooms, nothing could be more. I almost get angry about how stupid it is, but it's ridiculous.
And of course, ministers' churches are already protected from having, they can do whatever kind of marriages they believe in. That's
Right.
what the First Amendment's all about.
Thank you
The
for saying.
government cannot tell people.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm curious though, you mentioned West Virginia's excellent anti-discrimination laws. Would you support adding sexual orientation to the laws that prohibit discrimination based on other categories like race and sex and religion and so on?
Yeah, I have been a proponent of that in the past, and I want to make sure that it's written correctly so that we don't set aside a particular. I'm always sensitive about protected classes of people where we put a particular class here and a class here and a class here. But certainly, it's inconceivable that somebody, to me, could be fired from their workplace on the basis of their sexual orientation. That's inconceivable to me. Now, if you bring that to the workplace and you, act in an inappropriate manner, well, certainly you should, face retribution or consequences for that, as you would in a heterosexual relationship. So, that's another case where we should not be discriminated. I agree.
You mentioned sexual orientation specifically, but what about gender identity? Do you think transgender should be protected as well?
Many of those issues get above and beyond my ability to philosophically or scientifically understand. But I have a hard line in terms of anti-discrimination. So that I always lean and come down on that side. And I'd have to get much more specific about various classes. There seems to be always another class of people identified as requiring some protected status. So I don't want to continue to add to protected status, but I want to set forth a principle of non-discrimination that I always kind of view everything through that prism. So I don't know if that's a specific answer, but I'd probably need more specifics in
So
order
it
to get.
just depend on what's in the bill?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend, but I will say I view that in a way that I'll always lean towards the side of non-discrimination.
Get back to some political or state government issues. What did the legislature not accomplish this year or the past few years that you would really like to see accomplished and you'll push for?
I think a more, and I want to come back to one thing also, but I think one of the things that we haven't been able to fully accomplish is a comprehensive tax reform. We commissioned a special committee to review the tax structure in West Virginia and returned some results. Felt like we got a lot of information on the table as a result of that, but a comprehensive tax reform that incents growth, more of a pro-growth strategy where we broaden the base, lower the rates, address the issue of taxing, and it's a constitutional issue, personal property tax on business inventory and equipment. Has been identified as a job deterrent by every economist that's studied this. I think that is one of the things that I hope that we get to in the next legislative session, which is very important. The second thing is an intermediate appellate court. I would have loved to have, and I proposed a bill, and I will continue to advocate for an intermediate appellate court. I think that's important. Now, what I'll say is these things are tough to do in a declining budget environment. It's much easier to implement tax reform and strike up an intermediate appellate court when you're not $270 million behind on the budget. And I appreciate the question because it comes right on the heels of a lot of the questions about social issues. And one of the things that I would really like for us to focus on more is the things that create jobs. That should be our primary focus, and let people live their lives. We are maybe delve too much into social issues occasionally, and I would like for us to focus on growing this economy and providing a world-class education system and ensuring that our infrastructure needs are met. And that's a lot to put on your plate there, So when we start getting into some of the social issues, I wish we'd stay away from.
You're running to be a delegate for the Republican National Convention. That seems like it might be a pretty interesting concept.
I can't imagine how great this will be in a contested convention to be a part of that. It's history, and whether I obtain that position or not, I'm still planning on going to the convention because I want to be there. It's so close, isn't it?
You're on the ballot as uncommitted.
Uh-huh.
Is that still what you're feeling? You're still okay?
Yes. In fact, I've had calls recently from the operatives of the remaining campaigns. I was, frankly, a Marco Rubio guy to begin with, and so that lasted a while. And then the field was winnowed down. But, so I still, frankly, haven't made up my mind yet.
Do you think it's possible that someone who is not one of the remaining three on the ballot could come out of that convention? Paul Ryan keeps being talked about.
Yeah, and I think that is you can't say it's not theoretically possible, but I think that would be a horrible outcome. That the voters didn't get an opportunity to weigh in on the candidates. I think you should have had your name on the ballot if you wanted to be president. So I hope that doesn't occur that way.
Anything else? Well, this has been a really good hour. Thank you so
I don't
much.
know. Yeah, thank you. Always, it's those